So this is the day before we bake the sourdough bread. Tomorrow I would like to bake 2 sourdough bread, and then tonight what I'm doing is taking out the starter I have from the fridge, which has been inside the fridge for the last 2 years that I bake regularly with, and then I'm going to give another feeding overnight, and then we're going to use the starter tomorrow to bake the bread. So a simple feeding basically involves the starter, the flour, and the water with equal weight. So one portion of starter, one portion of water, one portion of flour. So here we got 50 grams of starter. I'm gonna add 50 grams of water. Here I'm using distilled water just in case sometimes in the tap water there might be something that deactivates my nice fermentation process. And then I often use either whole wheat flour or rye flour to feed my starter because I personally find in this way the starter is a little bit more active than the starter that's fed by white flour. But you can also do it with white flour. It's just a personal preference. So we're gonna add about 50. And by the way, this does not have to be precise or exact in any way, so it's okay to be 55 grams versus 50. That's why you can see that I don't have a very precise digital scale. Something like this simple and old school style works perfectly fine. So now all we are doing is just to mix them all together. So again, 1 portion of flour, 1 portion water, 1 portion of starter. 1, 1, 1. Very easy to remember. Okay. Now we're just mixing it well. So you can also take a look at the consistency right now. After fresh feeding, the starter should not be very runny. It also should not be very thick. It's hard to tell, but if you're doing this often, you will get to know your starter and you would know, even by looking at the texture, whether or not the portion is right, the flour and the water portion. So now I'm just going to put this back into my tiny jar. So this very starter has been working for me for the last 2 years, and I bake pretty much every weekend with it. So now what we're gonna do is just lightly cover the lid. Does not have to be very tight, and then keep it at a location that's a little bit warm than your room temperature. We can take a look at the starter that we fed last night. Now it's morning time and you can see all the nice bubbles. The starter is pretty active and it's ready to be used for next bread. So we're gonna take about 2/3 of the starter and then use it to mix with the dough, and then the rest I'll just put it back to the fridge for the next time. Okay, now it's morning time. We're gonna start making the dough. So what I have here is in total 800 grams of flour. So today I'm making like a country bread style. So the mixture is 100 grams of rye flour, 300 grams of whole wheat flour, and 400 grams of white flour. It could be regular all-purpose flour, could be bread flour. Either way would work. And also around 10 grams of kosher salt. So that gives me 2 sourdough breads. So as you can see, I have my flour mixed here in the bowl. And by the way, the mixture does not have to be exact, and you can try your own recipe and figure out what is the flavor that you like. And in terms of hydration, we're going to do 70% high hydration bread today. So that means 560 grams of water is going to be mixed with the flour. So I'm just gonna add some water, like about half of the total amount of water that I need to use first, and then mix it a little bit, and then add the other half of the water. Adding more water now. You can see that the water and flours are mixed. The dough is a bit lumpy, but don't worry, that's what we need right now. We will put a clean cloth on top of it and let it rest for about half an hour before we mix the starter and the dough together. Now you can see that the dough has been sitting there for about half an hour and it's already looking different from the last stage we were in. Is take out the starter and then mix it with the dough. So what I have here is very roughly maybe like 150 grams, 200 grams of starter. I'm gonna just use about 2/3 of it. I'm not gonna measure it. You can see all nice bubbles. The starter is pretty active. We'll mix them together and do a few rounds of turning. And then we're gonna continue to do this every hour or so for the next 5 to 6 hours during the day. So basically every hour-ish, we're gonna take out the dough and then give it a nice turn and mix. Okay, so now we're just gonna give this nice dough a round of turn like that. You can see that the dough is already developing compared to last time. It's bouncing like this. Can you see the change in the texture? Let it do the work by itself. Now it's about 5 p.m. After 6.5 hours of resting, with a few times of turning between, this dough is ready to move on to the next stage. And you can see like the dough is roughly 1.5 or twice of the size compared to where we started. And now what I'm gonna do is take this dough out. You can see the nice bubble structure inside. And then I'm making 2 breads today, so I'm going to separate them into 2 halves like that. And then these 2 are my forms. So what I'm going to do right now is going to form. So now both doughs are in the form, and make sure that you cover them with the flour around to prevent being stick to the form. So now we're gonna start a second stage proof, which takes about 1 hour to 2 hours, depends on your room temperature. So we will see you in a little bit again. Now the breads are ready to be baked. One of them is going to this Dutch oven. So in terms of baking time, it's 500 Fahrenheit, and then we're gonna start with 30 minutes with the lid, and then once we hit that time, and we're gonna take off the lid and bake another 7 to 8 minutes. Now time is up, and these are our sourdough breads. They look nice and yummy. Enjoy.